I love emergency medicine. We're at our best when it's the most chaotic because that's how we thrive. The nights, the weekends, the holidays, that's what we train for, right? When we could no longer actually take care of the patients the way we would want our grandmothers treated, that's when we started having problems.
Michelle is one of 3 physicians we talked to who works for a private equity-backed emergency department. After private equity came to their hospitals, patients sat in the waiting room for hours and went home to record medical bills.
Nobody feels good about 15-hour wait times. Nobody feels good about bad patient outcomes.
Physicians are experiencing burnout and moral injury at unprecedented rates.
The fact that investors or companies are coming into this place that is just for people who are in trouble or are scared or are dying to say, how can we make money here, feels to me unholy.
These 3 doctors are speaking out about the devastating impact private equity is having on their work and the lives of their patients.
We have this kind of sacred relationship with patients, and we take an oath to take care of patients. And I think that really is at odds with the goals of a corporation.
Michelle Weiner is an emergency room physician in Detroit.
The city of Detroit has taken a lot of crap over the years. We have a huge vulnerable population, and I think they deserve better. And I'm not even talking about the Lions.
Michelle started working at Ascension Hospital just weeks before she and her colleagues were replaced by Team Health, a private staffing firm owned by Blackstone, the world's largest private equity fund.
We started seeing it almost immediately. It used to be that we would have enough staff that we could efficiently move patients through. Because when you really look at the board and realize there's people waiting for 15 hours and we could have had a better patient outcome if they had been seen in 6 hours, that's really hard to deal with at the end of the day, knowing you're not actually doing your best.
Team Health is what's known as a contract management group.
None of the doctors knew that they were coming in, that the contract had been sold. Nobody told them until the day that they had taken over. I mean, it was almost like being bought and sold like cattle.
Clayton Dalton has a similar story. He was an emergency physician at Presbyterian Hospital in Santa Fe.
It was a great place to work. We had a good group of doctors who enjoyed working there. Many of them had been there since the hospital opened.
In 2023, Presbyterian announced it would be contracting with a private staffing firm, Sound Physicians, and firing all of its emergency room doctors.
It was a bit of a surprise when they let us know that they were going to be terminating all of us.
The hospital gave the physicians the chance to be rehired by the staffing firm.
I didn't know about Sound Physicians specifically, but I knew a fair bit about the kind of business they were.
Sound Physicians, like Team Health, is a private equity-backed firm that places emergency physicians at hospitals across the country. The company is owned by the healthcare giant Optum Health and the PE firm Summit Partners.
They're not usually in it for the long term. They're not thinking about how do we improve this business long term. They think about how do we make things look better on the short term so we can sell it to somebody else.
Clayton went to the local press and protested Sound Physicians' arrival, but ultimately uprooted and found work at a hospital 3 hours across the state. Emergency medicine is one of the youngest medical specialties. It was a wartime necessity and then expanded into trauma centers across the country. Because the United States doesn't have a national healthcare system, emergency departments also became the last resort for people who were uninsured or who didn't have a primary care doctor. If you're in primary care, you can open up your own practice. Emergency physicians are different. They need to work with a hospital. So historically, they would form democratic groups that function like a cooperative and contracted with local hospitals. These doctors would share the decision-making and the profits. In the 1970s, a few physicians abandoned the democratic model and started trying to make the group into a business. The physicians no longer had shared equity in decision-making. They just worked for 1 or 2 doctors who had ownership. That's the contract management group. In the 90s and 2000s, these groups consolidated and expanded, and leadership slowly became ex-physicians and business executives, not working doctors. One of these doctor executives was Lynn Massengale, the founder of Team Health. Team Health started, they like to say, in a closet in the lobby of the emergency department in 1979, and grew to be one of the biggest physician staffing agencies in the country.
When we came together in the mid-90s and tried to grow this thing into a national entity, we had the blessing of strong, non-physician business people that joined us.
This business model essentially created a model that was interesting to private equity.
Mitchell Lee was a physician at St. John's Ascension with Michelle, and now lives in Asheville, North Carolina.
Mission Hospital is in the community that I live in, and what's happened to it is really an example of what's been happening throughout the entire country, because Mission Hospital is the only level 2 trauma center in all of Western North Carolina. It's the only major hospital, which means there's no other options and there's no competition.
In 2019, Mission was taken over by HCA, the largest for-profit hospital in the country. HCA contracts with Team Health. Since the acquisition, over 200 doctors have left the hospital throughout departments, and the hospital is at risk of losing Medicare funding.
There are now multiple municipal lawsuits, antitrust lawsuits, class action lawsuits against Mission Hospital or HCA for anti-competitive behavior and raising the costs. And there is a movement of the citizens really standing up to oust HCA out of the community.
Private equity started buying CMGs in the 2000s and 2010s. Today, 25% of emergency departments are staffed by PE-backed CMGs. Private equity has been interested in healthcare for the last 20 years, citing, as Bain Capital put it, an aging population. PE has invested more than $830 billion in healthcare in the last 20 years and has driven consolidation of the market through mergers and acquisitions.
I think that one of the things that is very attractive to a CMG or a corporate entity or a private equity investor about emergency medicine in particular is this idea of a captive market. Patients don't really have an opportunity to choose or to do some market research before they decide where they're going to go when they're having crushing chest pain, or when they go off the road in a winter ice storm and are in a traffic accident, right? There's no decision there.
When a PE-backed CMG takes over an emergency room, physicians report caring for more patients and shorter times with those patients. CMGs replace experienced practitioners with lower-paid roles, and patients start seeing unexpected bills, huge bills. A lawsuit against Team Health in North Carolina claimed Team Health pushed unnecessary tests and defrauded state and federal Medicare.
There was no transparency whatsoever. In the old group, we were allowed to see what was billed and coded under our names. In this new group, we were not allowed to see any of the billing.
A 2020 study showed that PE-backed CMGs were routinely taking physicians out of network and then billing patients. A study from Stanford showed that 42% of emergency room visits in 2016 came with a surprise out-of-network bill.
The hospital still says Presbyterian on the front. And there are a lot of people in New Mexico who think of Presbyterian as their healthcare system, right? Maybe they have insurance through Presbyterian, their doctors are Presbyterian, they're gonna go to the Presbyterian hospital when they have chest pain. And there's not a sign on the front door that says that ground floor front door ER is now owned by Sound Physicians Incorporated, an outside investor-owned corporate entity. There's no way patients would know.
In 2022, Congress passed the No Surprises Act, which put a cap on how much a patient could be charged by an out-of-network provider. Team Health came out publicly in support of the No Surprises Act, but then secretly backed a dark money pack with its competitor Envision to oppose the legislation. They spent $75 million on ads calling the act government rate setting. For now, patients are protected, but that's left the CMGs battling in court with major insurance companies over who's going to actually cover the bills. Since the act passed, Envision filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and Team Health has been labeled at risk. They lost their main way of making profits off of patients.
And this is often how they approach the legislature, to say we're going to innovate. Well, they innovate how to make more money for themselves. They don't really innovate anything that's actually helping with society, because their secret sauce was gouging patients, without any transparency in what's billed or collected by the physicians.
Mitchell is a member of the American Academy of Emergency Medicine Physician Group, which is currently suing Team Health and Envision under the corporate practice of medicine laws. In the late 19th century, during the last Gilded Age, laws were established that said you had to have a license to practice medicine, that you had to have certain standards of care, and that a doctor or hospital couldn't be owned by a for-profit corporation. This was the regulation of the corporate practice of medicine. These laws were active in most states, but it varied how often they were enforced. The lawsuits against Team Health and Envision are pending, but there are other things physicians are doing right now to fight the private equity takeover. In 2020, Michelle started talking to her colleagues about the changes that were happening at St. John's. And in 2023, the workers employed with Team Health announced they were unionizing.
It wasn't the difficulty of the job. The nights, the weekends, the violent patients, the drunk, psychotic patients, that's what we trained for, right? It's when we could no longer actually take care of the patients in a way we thought was safe and good, the way we would want our grandmothers treated. That's when we started having problems.
Michelle will tell you she never expected to lead a union drive. She's a lifelong Republican.
Everybody says, well, how did you get a bunch of doctors to unionize? Because doctors are notoriously hard to unionize. And I said, well, this has been a 7-year process. And when the only Republican in the group says, I think it's time to unionize, we've run out of options, everybody just kind of said, okay, I guess we're there.
The FTC is taking public comments about the role of private equity in healthcare, the rising costs, the deaths in hospitals, the short staffing.
A common theme across comments is that growing financialization in the healthcare industry can force medical professionals to subordinate their medical judgment to corporate decision makers' profit motives at the expense of patient health.
And they're also reviewing private equity acquisitions of healthcare providers under antitrust laws.
The fact that investors or companies are coming into this place that is just for patients, right? It's just for people who are in trouble or are scared or are dying. To come into that space and to say, how can we make money here, feels to me unholy. It should just be a public utility. Just like you should be able to have access to safe drinking water. You should be able to have access to electricity. Like, you should be able to have access to good emergency care whenever you need it.
When I actually applied to do emergency medicine, it was one of the most competitive specialties you could do because everybody wanted to do emergency medicine. And now we didn't match 50% of our residency positions last year because people have been rotating through the department, and as medical students, they see what it's like and the chaos and how everybody is treated, and they are just like, I'm out, I don't want to do this, I'll become a dermatologist, I'll remove moles for the rest of my life, and we're losing a lot of good people.
Thanks for watching The Classroom from More Perfect Union. This is part of our series about jobs in America that have gotten worse because of economic and policy changes. If you have a job in an industry like that, tell us your story below. And as always, like and subscribe for more videos like this one.